Good evening. Welcome to the Irish NFL show. It is me, Brian O'Leary, with Colin Cronin tonight. No Conor Brophy this week to host the show. Colin, it's great to see you. Week 5 doesn't seem too long since we started the season. Here we are already at week 5, just beyond the quarter stage, as they say, even though it's 17 weeks, 18 weeks, whatever it is these days.
Yeah, week 4 would have taken us to what, 23.5%. I was working it out given it was the Broncos season. Look, this is the thing, it flies by. And the opening month is always a little bit crazy. You get to see some things that make some sense, some new things, but an awful lot of teams kind of just settling down, and especially now when training camp and preseason are different, right? Over the last 5 years, they are different. They don't tackle in the same way in training camp. The starters take a couple of snaps in preseason games. So really the first few weeks are ironing out a lot of the issues that some of the teams have. I think by the time we get to week 5, we will now have a real sense, I think, of where the league is at after, there'll be some teams that go on runs, there'll be some teams that slide away, but I think we'll have a much better sense after this set of games, Brian.
You put a percentage on that, and you mentioned the Broncos. Are we suggesting that that's the Broncos season is over already? I certainly think maybe my team's season is over already. Are we back in that world again where we don't have much to play for? Us two in particular with our teams.
Well, I think you can add Conor Brophy and Shane Brennan to that list as well. I don't think the Bears or the Patriots are going to be, doing a whole lot. When you consider, I think the Broncos, and we'll get to this later, but the moves this week, getting rid of Randy Gregory, I think is just a bloated contract, but an awful lot of rumors around trades. This is where we'll begin to see the trade stuff hot up. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if you were to see Jerry Jeudy probably the most likely to move on in the next couple of weeks.
You mentioned the Bears there. Obviously, the Bears are playing later on tonight in Thursday Night Football on the road against the Washington Commanders. A podcast for that game and preview is available. Myself and Andrew Morgan previewed that game last night. I can't say we were too excited by that one. I don't think many people are looking forward to this game, maybe with the respect of the Bears and Commanders fans. This is first segment. If you're listening on the podcast later on this evening or tomorrow morning, this is the first segment of the podcast. This segment is brought to you by RealPoint, demonstrating the value of global PR and comms. Check out their website, www.realpoint.com. Okay, Colin, let's crack on. I think we're going to talk about a better game now as opposed to our Thursday night game, and that is Sunday afternoon in Tottenham. I will be making the trip over on Sunday morning for that game, joining Andrew Morgan. And I'm very much looking forward to this one because the Jags rebounded well last weekend. Obviously, you were at that game in Wembley. I think they played in a manner which was, let's not have Desmond Ridder beat us, and it worked to a charm. And I think Trevor Lawrence had a nice, serviceable game. I think he threw for 200 yards even. It was a respectful game for him, the touchdown to Ridley. And they're going up against arguably the hottest team in the league right now. And we touched on during the offseason and into training camps how the Bills would have been suited by all the kind of pressure and talk around the Jets and even the Chiefs and the Bengals are obviously mute as one of the teams that would be in the AFC running. People kind of tailed off slightly on the Bills. You said, no, they're a team to keep an eye on, in particular with Josh Allen. That's your MVP candidate for a year. What do you expect in this one on Sunday? Because right now, the Bills look like an offense that can't be stopped.
Yeah, I think the Bills are serious business. If I was looking for a musical equivalent of Josh Allen, it's Blur's song too, because it's crash bang wallop the whole way. He is fantastic. I was talking to JP Acosta just before we started going live, Brian, and that'll be going out a little bit later. He described the way Josh Allen behaves sometimes as a dog having the zoomies, where they just kind of lose the run of themselves and they don't even know what's going on. Usually they're very calm and collected, but all of a sudden they just go nuts. And I thought that was a wonderful way of describing Josh Allen. But he is my MVP pick. I think in terms of the QBs, I think it's between himself and Lamar. I think Christian McCaffrey has a real chance if he stays fit as well. But in this game, the Bills are coming in as the form team. And after that surprise in week one, they've really found their mojo, I suppose. 37 points in each of the last three. They are very streaky. Yeah, you missed it the other night. I talked about how Josh Allen can be a little bit like the way Wayne Rooney used to go on those goal scoring runs, where he'd get one and all of a sudden, he'd score for the next 10, 11, 12 weeks. Josh Allen can get hot like that. So it'll be interesting to see. The Jags, they got away with it last week. They got a functional win, right? They were the better team, but the Falcons were awful on offense. Myself and Shane were there, and Desmond Ridder he wasn't good enough last week. It'll be interesting to see if Arthur Smith can get a response. We'll come back to that. But the Bills are really good on both sides of the ball against the Dolphins. Obviously, losing Tre'Davious White is huge. Von Miller is back, though I don't think, I think they'll really ease him in. I think they have learned. Von Miller is December, January, and hopefully if you're the Buffalo Bills, February player. The Jags need to. It is what's interesting with the Jags. It's their intermediate game, probably more than anything, Brian. Right? It's anything kind of short game seems to be okay, other than some issues in the red zone. But the short game is okay. The deep ball is okay. That intermediate, anything between kind of 7 to 20 yards, that's the area they're really struggling in. It'll be interesting to see if the week in London will have been good for them, right? Because this is an experiment. I mean, they've been away for the longest now. Has that helped? I expect this to be a closer game just for the Bills, because coming off that Dolphins game, having to travel. But for me, the Bills should win this.
Yeah, interviewed Phoebe Schechter last night, obviously, who done the live show for us, Face of Sky Sports, and she did kind of call out one of the key factors that has slightly gone under the radar this week because of the talk of the Bills' play and deserving play of last weekend's win, is the fact that the Jags have been here for 2 weeks. And this, as you said, this is the first time we talk about teams coming in on a Tuesday. Of late, both teams have arrived in on Friday the last couple of years, so there's no advantage there. But in this instance, they've been there for quite some time. They're used to the London surroundings. It'd be interesting to see what they're like on Sunday. And they have played in Tottenham. Let's bear in mind, they played there 2 years ago. They won that game with a last-second field goal. They're used to the surroundings. I know it's a different coaching staff, but a lot of those players are still there. So it will be interesting to see. But the Bills Mafia's coming to town. I would expect this game on Sunday to be a Bills or like home game. It is their home game, obviously, officially, but like the enormity of the game, they seem to be really kind of buying into coming over. I mean, I am surprised Von Miller's making the trip. I thought, not necessarily because they want him to play. Look, I agree. I think he'd be on a snap count, but more so, is it really worth putting him on a plane for 7 hours when he's going to be on a very low end snap count? Would he not be better off served to keep him for the following week and put him in then? But okay, I suppose there's a bit of togetherness about this team right now. It's the Bills for me. I do agree. I don't think it'll be a blowout type of team. But you said it there. You look at the Jags scorelines, with the exception maybe of the Colts game, they haven't really lit it up on offense. And can they live with the Bills if the Bills get into that streak, which we've seen, how they started so hot against the Commanders 2 weeks ago in that 37-3 victory? They go out and put 48 points in the Dolphins. You'd imagine they'd be able to put up good scores on this Jags defense that's been up and down. And Josh Allen isn't rushing the ball as much as he was. And a lot that's down to the fact that James Cook is starting to kind of mature into the player that they thought he'd be. He was a third-round pick last year. Sorry, second-round pick. I think they're finally kind of getting the best out of him now. So I think we're both Lions. I think Bills to win this one and march on. And then that leads us into the 6 o'clock slate of games. And the first game we're going to discuss is the Ravens AFC North clash on the road going into Pittsburgh. This game has slightly changed over the course of the last week. One, because Kenny Pickett is essentially struggling. I think it looks like he's not going to play. He's been ruled out, and Mitch Trubisky will step in. And it looks like, despite the Ravens having a nice win last weekend, they were struggling with players out and absent. It looks like they're going to get a lot of them back this week. I touched on during the week with you that it's unusual that you find 2 weeks in a row where you come up against a team where you're playing the backup quarterback. The Browns, obviously, Deshaun Watson removed last weekend prior to the game. They went up against a rookie. They beat him. Now they're going to go up against Mitch Trubisky, who's had his flaws over the last couple of years. Where do you see this one? Is it a game that the Ravens should win, or are we in for one of those typical AFC North clashes where we just don't know where it's going to swing in roundabouts throughout the course of the 3 hours?
Uh, I mean, the South Park had that "Blame Canada" song, and that is essentially for the Steelers. The I was saying, Brian, as you well know, I listen to a lot, as you do, a lot of podcasts on the NFL. Read a lot. There was so much optimism about this Steelers team coming into the season. But on the Ringer, they have been keeping tabs on how many games it is since the Steelers had a 400-yard game. It is now 39 games since the Steelers had a game where they had more than 400 yards of offense. And that is shocking, really. It isn't something you have to say. It is an indictment of Mike Tomlin as well, because he's allowed it to get that bad. And I rate Tomlin really highly, but they have enormous issues there. Nothing seems to get going. Kenny Pickett is QB1. Could the enforced change potentially be good in the short term, right? Just because things were so bad there. I don't know, though. They're going up against a Ravens team who I really like. I had Zay Flowers as my offensive rookie of the year. I think Lamar is fantastic. I think Lamar is reborn with the new contract. One thing I will note, because it came up on a podcast during the week on Richard Sherman's, where basically one of Jimmy G's former colleagues in San Francisco said he felt Jimmy could have suited up last year. Lamar took an awful lot of flack when he didn't suit up. Jimmy didn't. I think that's an interesting one. I think this will be a tough battle. Steelers are always best when they have their back against the wall, but this Ravens team look really focused. As I said, they seem to be getting some players back, and ultimately I think John Harbaugh is an excellent coach. I think most of the time in the league, you win if you have the better QB. If you don't have the better QB, then you need to have the better head coach, or you need to get extremely lucky. I think ultimately the Ravens have the better QB. They have a 50-50 on the head coaches. The Steelers could get fortunate and win this, put in a performance with their back against the wall, but I have the Ravens for me on this one.
Lamar had 2 rushing touchdowns 2 weeks ago. He had 2 rushing touchdowns last weekend. How does the Steelers go about stopping him? Because Steelers defense has been up and down. I mean, the week 1, they were poor against the 49ers. They rebounded against the Browns. But yeah, last weekend against the Texans, I wouldn't say they were torn apart, but it was evident early on that they weren't at the same rate as they were in the previous week. Are you concerned there's an inconsistency? Because everybody talks so highly of this defense. This defense can take this team, whether no matter who's playing their quarterback. But we haven't seen it, maybe with the exception of that Browns game in particular, with the 2 defensive touchdowns. They're not right either. And I know everything's on the offense right now, and Canada's getting all the kind of, he's on the tough road at the moment. But is the defense at the level we should be seeing? And can they really stop Lamar if he continues to rush it because he's back rushing the way we saw early on last season?
I think sometimes players can lose somebody who is almost a talisman. I think losing Cam Hayward was huge. And I think that possibly people underestimated just how big an impact that would have on the Steelers. I think his leadership, and I don't think they've been able to replace him as a player either. I think that is an area of concern, because he leads the defense and he holds things together, and he makes life so much more difficult for the opposition. They will have been hurt by the start of the season, and Tomlin will look to get them a response, especially in a tough divisional matchup. So I expect this to be a war of attrition. I don't think the Ravens will blow them out. I just don't. They probably don't. With that many players still out or coming back, they don't have the explosiveness to do that. But yeah, I mean, certainly this is a concern for the Steelers. I think, because they're not going to get Cam Hayward back for some time. And probably you're right, I think, Brian, in that the offensive struggles have been so bad that maybe the defense that usually is a top tier unit just hasn't quite been, where we would expect. It's been average. I think average is probably the best way to describe it.
Yeah, Ravens for me as well. So we're aligned on both games so far. I have a funny feeling we're going to be aligned on the next one, and that is the Carolina Panthers on the road against the Detroit Lions. Very impressive Lions win last Thursday night against the Packers. And on the show on Tuesday night, you did a great piece around the rookies and how well the rookies have been playing. And Bryce Young was the number one pick, but yet right now he's probably trailing third in those three particular quarterbacks of him, Richardson, and CJ Stroud in terms of how they're playing. This is a tough one to go on the road. Like Detroit is not like what it used to be in terms of you're going in there. This crowd, it's a sellout crowd now. They're all going to be up for it. The Lions look like they're going in the right direction. Any potential slip ups here? Are the Lions potentially looking a little bit too far ahead because they have some very winnable games coming up?
Like their complacency is an issue, and we've seen that time and again in the league, and the disparity between the best teams and the teams towards the bottom is never as big in the NFL as it is potentially in some other sports. You can have a bad day, sure, but it is the case of any given Sunday. It is the case that you have to show up. I think that it's not like the Lions have been immaculate this year, and they are still kind of working through things. So I would hope that for their sake, there won't be complacency. I think we saw Bryce Young take some baby steps last week. He was better at taking care of the ball. He's going to have to be. They will be raucous. Certainly the Detroit crowd, for Carolina, this was never going to be a season, really, right? They were talk that potentially they could win it, but it was always going to be growing pains because of where they were at. We've heard this week they are looking to bring in, and they've recognized they need to bring in additional weapons because he doesn't have, outside of Thielen, really anyone to throw to. And I just think that's probably a bridge too far ultimately. For the Panthers. The Lions have lots of talent, and I think they should have enough.
Yeah, the last time the Lions played at home, they held the Falcons to 6 points in a really dominant game. We saw Hutchinson getting 1.5 sacks last weekend in Green Bay. I think it was the second one of the opening plays of the game. Like, he's clearly starting to show the reason as to why he was picked so highly last year. The defense just seems to be evolving. We talk about Goff, we talk about Jahmyr Gibbs, Brown, all these various different players. The tight end, the rookie tight ends having a great season. Laporta. But defensively, they've been really strong. And I just find it very difficult to see how Bryce Young can go in there on Sunday. So that's 3 for 3. We're aligned. It doesn't normally happen this way. I have a funny feeling this might be the one that breaks them all. This is the last game in the first segment. If you're recording by podcast, if you're listening by podcast, that is the Texans column. Texans on the road, 2-2. Against the Falcons, looking to rebound off a difficult loss in London last weekend. I'll ask you this first. How long before Desmond Ridder is ousted, Taylor Heineke is back in like a Washington Commanders style thing where he comes in, takes over? Because last weekend he really struggled. I don't know if it was the nature of the game. But they are at home. The expectations are a little bit easier for them to play in Atlanta. They'll have the running backs, out there gunning. They seem to do strong things at home. They won both their home games so far this season. Will they continue that? Will it be 3 in a row? Or do you think Texans are primed for another win on the road?
I think in terms of Desmond Ridder, he has a head coach who, I've said it before, he knows his mind. Whatever you think of him, it's a bit, Arthur Smith is Arthur Smith, and he isn't going to particularly care. If you remember the video for Bittersweet Symphony by The Verve, where Richard Ashcroft is walking down the street and he's just knocking into people, that's Arthur Smith. He's just going to do his own thing, and he is not going to be dissuaded from that. But Ridder is a real problem. The absence of Kyle Pitts is a real problem. They have an incredibly exciting back in Bijan, and it's difficult to overstate just how good he is. And when you get to see him in person, the way he makes players miss is he just is gifted. Like the stadium, like the excitement, but equally the concern from Jags fans whenever he got the ball in his hands was palpable. But it's not sustainable to try to win without a QB. They need Ritter to show a lot more in this game. And I was hopeful. I was very excited by the Falcons before the season. I thought he could do enough, but I don't see it now. And I see in CJ Stroud a player who has really now look, we have seen this before. Sometimes rookie QBs come in, all goes well for the first few weeks. He needs to show it's a tiny sample size, but has he done everything that has been asked of him thus far? Yes, all that and more. And they appear to have done a good job of actually putting some talent around him. And he just is really good in terms of his feel and his anticipation, the way in which he gets when pressure is coming at him. And DeMeco Ryans is proving to be the inspirational leader that we heard. I'm going to say that the Falcons are going to continue to struggle to score points. I can see the Texans getting a surprise here.
I'll go Falcons, and more so. I totally agree with you on the quarterback situation. I think I don't think I was as high on him as Connor was. In particular, Connor felt that Desmond Ritter would fit into this team. I think he selected him to win the division. I was never sold on it because he played 4 games towards the end of last season. There was more sample size on him than there was on the likes of Sam Howell, and he only threw one touchdown, and that was in the final game against the Cardinals. He just doesn't strike me as the guy that can lead this team in the long run. Taylor Heinicke will be suited to the situation when he comes in at some stage. And I think he will. But I do think they'll find a way to get over the line in this one. I think more so because the running game. I think Texans will do well. They put up a good fight. I think defensively for the Falcons, I think we'll see a bit of a reaction to last weekend's loss as well. I'm going to go Falcons. You go Texans. That ends the first segment on the podcast. This segment was brought to you by RealPoint, demonstrating the value of global PR and comms. Check out their website, www.realpoint.com. On to the second segment, Colin, and the first game within that is the Saints. The Saints coming off a home loss last weekend against the Bucs. A lot of people felt they would have rebounded after their previous defeat to the Packers, but they didn't. They lost 23-9, and they go on the road into New England. And New England are having the troubles of their own after last week. In particular, Mac Jones been axed in the game in the third quarter, and Bill Belichick played it down. But things don't seem right for me with the Patriots, and they're going up against the Saints team that, by and large, their defense has played quite well throughout the course of the season. Do you see Mac Jones finally going to get over the hump in this one, or is the Saints defense another team they will struggle against and put a true test up, and Saints ultimately coming out on top?
This is a tough game to call because I would expect Belichick will get a response from the Patriots, and they'll have to. They can't be as flat as they were the other night. I like the Saints have been fine at times, but to me, things look bleak in New England, right? Because I don't think they have enough on offense to score points, and even if Mac Jones gets back to where he was year one, I just don't. I don't think it's there. But equally with the Saints, I don't think everything is right there. And I think Dennis Allen, he's a great defensive coordinator. I just don't know if it's going to work with Dennis Allen as a head coach. You look at the Patriots, and obviously with Gonzalez going out and bringing back J.C. Jackson. Now, what a move! I mean. And why you would ever take a cornerback from Bill Belichick is ridiculous. He is there's nobody like him. Like his ability to turn bad players into good players, and that's what's so sad about seeing Gonzalez go down, because he was a gifted player who was going to be an incredible cornerback. You felt, but losing Judon as well. I'm going to go Saints, but I'm not going to expect this to be a high-scoring game. This could be reminiscent of the Colts versus the Broncos last year.
Yeah, I've been very disappointed with the Saints offensively. I was one who was champing at the bit going into the season. I was playing the Derek Carr card that he was going to bring back the expansive offense. Kamara would be best suited. Williams is there. Obviously, he's gone on IR, and I thought Olave would build up a connection. He has, but still, we're not seeing it. I mean, the wins they've had are more so because how well the defense has played to keep them in games, and they've come out the right side of it. But ultimately, they were found out last weekend, only scoring 9 points at home against the Bucks, and the previous week with a 17-point lead, they managed to throw that away. But I'm with you because you look at the two defenses. One, you got the Patriots defense now that are missing players. Is JC Jackson going to come in on Sunday and be able to kind of fit right in immediately? Like, despite the fact that he was there previously and he understands the nature of what Bill Belichick is 2 years removed from when he was there, he's going to need time to settle in. Judon's gone. I agree. It's a low scoring game. I think the Saints come out on the right side of it. It's just the struggle on offense, unless we see Mac Jones come out on Sunday. Like, there's times this season where Mac Jones has had the opportunity to win games. Week 1 against the Eagles, the Dolphins game, and he keeps talking about we need to do better, we need to get it done. But when is he going to get it done? Because patience is a key in this league at times. But like, surely the Patriots fans are kind of looking at this now, going, "This seems to be, coming to an end. This can't continue." Ultimately, they're not really in a position to replace him this year. But I don't know whether in the long term it's going to be sustainable. So for me, Saints win. They take the win, and Patriots struggles offensively. Continue and talk about offenses that can't move the ball. That brings us to the Giants. Giants on the road in Miami, and they're one team that can very much move the ball, certainly at home. And we see about 70 points up in the last home game against your beloved Broncos. Do you see a 70 burger, as Connor would say? Do you see something similar on Sunday with the Giants defense also struggling? Did play better on Monday. I would say that they played a lot better, but offensively, the offensive line is a complete disaster. And whether you like Daniel Jones or not, he's just not getting time to even get past the second read at the moment.
Yeah, I mentioned the Verve a little while ago. They also had the drugs don't work. Well, nothing apparently works for the Giants on offense currently. It looks it looks awful. You can see Dable is really frustrated. I know you have a lot of thoughts on the issues, but I can't help but think that if they could go get a time machine, they wouldn't give Saquon a 2 or 3 year deal and franchise tag Daniel Jones. I just think the message that it's sent isn't good. But ultimately the main issue is the line. And Evan Neal is an abject disaster. I was talking to you earlier today, and I said they're going to have to either move him to guard or they're just going to have to bench him. You cannot continue with Evan Neal at tackle. He's going to get his QB killed. Maybe he has been a little bit humbled given the response. He made some very silly comments against the fans. That's frustration again. I think there's a huge amount of frustration with the Giants because nothing has worked for them, and now they have to go to Miami against a team that's going to want to get back on track following a really disappointing loss for them. They thought that they could go up to Buffalo, they could put a marker down, they could show that they were the best. I think for the Dolphins, the concern for the Dolphins should be that this Vic Fangio defense does not look great. The bend don't break stuff. If you've a really talented offense, you can get at them. I think, unfortunately, our two respective teams don't have that. I don't see the Giants conceding 70 because I think Wink Martindale will have them up. I did like his quip that he was sleeping like a baby, in that he was up every 2 hours. He was crying and going to the bathroom. But I do think he'll have the Giants defensively in a better position. But yeah, I can't see beyond the Dolphins. But then you say that in the NFL, right? You say that I can't see beyond the Dolphins, and then mad stuff happens, right? I like the Cardinals beating the Cowboys, but the Dolphins need a win. They need to get over the Bills game. So I think they get it.
There's a lot of people that were suggesting last week's Bills win and the manner how the game was played in terms of them putting 48 points was a real downer for the Dolphins. But I think the Dolphins need to step back and just realize we're having a really good season. We're still tied with we're still tied with this team at the top of the division. So let's not panic. They still have to play each other again in Miami. That will come around again. It was the opposite way around last year. Bills went down there early in the season. Dolphins beat them. They came to December. There was a Saturday night game. The Bills reversed the result. Like we could see the same thing come happen, later on in the season when the Bills have to go into Miami. But you're right, they got to get back on track. And to be honest, this is a perfect game for them to get back on track. And you talk about the defense. Defense against the Giants don't really have to worry at the moment in terms of the secondary and stuff. They can pin their ears back and go after the quarterback. And like you would imagine, they're going to do the same. Now, it looks like Saquon is finally going to come back on Sunday. Maybe that will be a huge help and allow relieve the pressure because they may have to scheme against the fact that he's back there. Which they haven't, neither of the teams that they played over the past 2 weeks from the NFC West and the Niners and Seattle have had to kind of concern themselves with a run game, which to be honest has been mediocre. Matt Breida went for something like 38 yards on Monday night. Dolphins, for me, I don't see it as a blowout. I think they will win. I think they'll cover that spread, which is 10 points, but I don't see it being one of those crazy games where they're up by 30, 40 points, and which people assume will happen on Sunday, because you said it. Like sometimes when teams come off a really difficult loss, they find ways to kind of regalvanize themselves, not necessarily come out on the right side of a result, but play a lot tougher the following week. I think it might be a bit of a tougher game for the Dolphins than people expect, but I still see them winning this game. We'll move on to the next one, and this is an enticing game in the AFC South, because right now every team in the AFC South is 2-2, and the Titans have won both their home games, can't seem to get a win on the road, struggled in both road games. Going into Indianapolis, and we talked about it in the offseason when we were doing our AFC South discussions in June, in August. These teams tend to beat each other on the road. It just seems to be one of these common teams in the division. They flip-flop results. Do you see it this weekend? Do you think the Titans will get their first road win, or are you buying into the Anthony Richardson frame, which was really impressive, bearing in mind the fact that they still lost the game, but the manner of that comeback against the Rams at home last weekend?
Yeah, well, I think anyone who watches this show or listens to the show for any length of time will know I'm a big fan of Anthony Richardson. I'm a massive fan of Shane Steichen. I think he's going to go on to do big things with the Colts if Jim Irsay can stay out of the way. That's a big if, of course. But something I saw during the week, Brian, right, is most games with 100+ yards against a single opponent since 2010. Nick Chubb has 6 games of more than 100 yards against the Bengals. I still want to see him back. Adrian Peterson had 6 games of more than 100 yards against the Packers. Derrick Henry has 6 games with more than 100 yards against the Jags. He's got 6 games with more than 100 yards against the Texans. And he has 7 games of more than 100 yards against the Colts. The Colts cannot stop Derrick Henry. And I think that is ultimately the difference in this one. Again, the Titans make no sense. And I think they will find it tougher because the Bengals have a real issue with Joe Burrow. He shouldn't be out there. And Anthony Richardson should be out there. Shane Steichen is a gifted schemer. And I think the Colts are headed in the right direction. I have concerns about the Titans roster. But as you said, this is a division where things follow a trend. And for that reason, I'm going to go with the Titans, even though I look at it objectively, I say the Colts should win this. But no, the things happen in this division. It's the Titans.
Aiden and Connor both went for the Colts. I was genuinely taken back by the fact that there was so much confidence around the Colts in this one. Like the Colts had a great comeback the second half last weekend, but for the first half, Anthony Richardson was held in check. The Rams did a great job on him. Now, in fairness, they adjusted at halftime. They came out really well. Like, Vrabel, for me, strikes me as the kind of head coach that will be scheming all week to find a way to navigate around Richardson. And I'm with you. I think the Titans are quietly going about their business at the moment. They struggled on the road in the other 2 games. This game will be more suited to them. It's in the dome, undercover, shall we say, in Indy. And I have them coming out the right side. I think this is the game we see Derrick Henry. In fairness, he had a good game last weekend, touchdown. really dominant performance against the struggling Bengals offense, in fairness. But in this one, I'm leaning Titans. I'm not 100% confident. I think it might be a tight one, but we'll go Titans. Talked about Joe Burrow there losing in Tennessee last weekend, and that is where we come to the last game in this segment, the first of the later games at 9 o'clock, and that is the Bengals on the road in Arizona. And a few weeks ago, we would have looked at this and said, this is the Bengals team that are supposed to be going to the Super Bowl, AFC #1, seeing potentially this is a gimme. Is it a gimme now, bearing in mind how well Arizona played? Like the results last weekend against the 49ers looks like it was a very comfortable day out for. But in the third quarter, they scored a touchdown. The rookie, who looks very impressive, the wide receiver, Wilson, 2 touchdowns last weekend. They brought that game back within 1 score, the 49ers. 49ers pull away in the fourth quarter. They're playing really well for this head coach. We didn't see it coming. We thought Gannon was, we saw all the off the field stuff leading up to the season. We weren't convinced, but he is getting a tune out of him. Do they find a way to cause a shock again? Another home game? Can't see another shock against one of the teams that are expected to be thereabouts come the end of the season.
I think they could, Brian, because I just don't think Burrow should be out there. I mean, he cannot drive the ball. He can't move properly in the pocket. They're putting him out there, I think, and he's going out there because he's so important to them, and because he did sign the contract, and I think he feels a degree of pressure because of that. The Tom Moore story famously comes to mind around Peyton Manning and not giving snaps to the backup, and that's where the Bengals find themselves, because they have to play Burrow. But I just don't think that calf is right, and you just see it. I saw a compilation of passes on a video during the week, and he's no power. My God, he's got no power. He looks like an aging QB. Now he will get it back, right? But what they would have been infinitely better doing is allowing him to sit out the first month of the season, but they didn't. He tweaked it again. I'm going to go with the shock here. And the Bengals were my Super Bowl pick, lest we forget. I thought they were absolutely all set up for it. But the Cardinals players are playing for their careers in the NFL and for future contracts. And I'm going to say they shock. Whether I think you're right. It's not as big a shock as it once would have been. But it would still be a surprise.
When we did our Crow Park show, and we spoke with the Browns hosting the Bengals, and I said Browns because I said people are playing this conversation down. We've seen it in the past. We saw it with Matthew Stafford's injury last year. People were suggesting, no, everything's fine. I wasn't convinced, and it's come to fruition. He's not playing well. You saw it last weekend. You're right. I saw the coverage during the week. He looks like a guy that just can't show it, but you just can't put the velocity in the shows that we once saw. And look, it will, as you said, it'll come around again. Come the end of the season, he might pick up the injury, might clear up. I will side with the Bengals, though. I saw in a defensive performance, once it was a home game against the Rams, that when their defense gets going, they can be up there with the best of them. And in this game, I think they might find a way to slow Dobbs down to an extent where Burrow offensively can do just enough with Mixon and maybe trying to get Chase. I think for them, the key is to get the ball out quickly. Don't have Burrow sitting back there trying to wait for coverage and wait for players to get open. Let's try quick dunk passes, screen pass to Mixon, get Chase. Higgins is obviously a question mark. He's got injured last weekend. It'd be interesting to see. Say he may play, with an injection or be in pain and play. And that's again, we're back to the Joe Burrow situation again. That's not sustainable either. But I'll side with the Bengals. I'm not convinced by it though. It says a lot for where the Cardinals are that we're looking at this game. You're going with the Cardinals. I'm not convinced by the Bengals, but I will side with the Bengals because they've got to get this one because the Bengals next 3 games, Seattle, 49ers, Bills. There is a scenario if they lose this game, they could end up 1-6 or something like that, and the season would be very much done. And maybe they'd have to shut Joe Burrow down at that stage. But I'll keep them alive for another week. I'll go Bengals. That closes out the second section of the Irish NFL show tonight. Segment as we move on to the final segment. All right, kicking off segment number 3, column is the Eagles coming off an overtime win in the division against the Commanders. They're going on the road to SoFi against the Rams, who've been very impressive. Came back, after seeing the Colts come back against them last weekend, found a way to win in overtime. They're hosting the Eagles. The Eagles are still not as convincing as they were last season. Is there a shock on the cards here, or bearing in mind how well the Rams are playing?
There could be, and while the Eagles aren't, playing as well as they were last season, they are annoying all the right people. Jack Del Rio losing his mind. It's unfair. How dare they be able to do this? How many teams have tried the tush push at this point, right? And how many other teams have failed? The Eagles can do it because of the players that they have. If Jalen Hurts wasn't built the way Jalen Hurts is, if Jason Kelce wasn't the center, like loads of other teams have tried and failed to do that, including your Giants, who, it's not as easy. People are like, oh, this is a gimme. Well, if it was a gimme, everybody would be doing it. It's the unique way in which, the Eagles have the players there. If that changed, if Jalen Hurts was out for a couple of weeks, they wouldn't be able to run it with the backup in the same way. If Jason Kelce was out, they wouldn't be able to run it in the same way. And I see, they're also annoying Nick Wright, who is obviously the Chiefs' biggest fan. So despite not playing,
he's annoying in himself, Colin. We don't need
to. Despite the fact that they aren't playing well, they're still winning, which is quite something. When you're like, it doesn't look the same, but you're sitting at 4-0, and you're like, they have a gear to go up. That they're kind of finding their feet under the new coordinators. I think it'd be a huge test. Puka Nacua has been outstanding. They've got Cooper Kupp coming back. What will that look like? Lots of talk around that. Jordan Rodriguez has done some pieces on that. It will be interesting to see how it goes, and it won't be easy for the Eagles. But I'm going to back them this week. I've been a big fan of what they have done, and I think they continue to do just enough. But I think this is a game where the narrative and what we've seen from the Rams means everything has changed on them, right? So I don't. If you asked me this back in August, I'd said, "Oh yeah, this is the Eagles definitely," and it'd be a huge upset for the Rams. I don't think it'd be a huge upset now at all. I think people would just look and go, "Oh yeah, that was coming."
Similar to what you said about the last one with the Cards hosting the Bengals. This would have been a gimme when we were looking at this. When we did our picks, way too early picks, we would have never looked at this game as a Rams victory or a Bengals victory in that regard to the last game. I am going to go with the Rams. We've all been very impressed with them, and I think in particular Matthew Stafford in terms of how he's played, because Matthew Stafford has come back. I knew Matthew Stafford was in for a good season when the tours before the season started and Cooper Kupp was ruled out. He got really agitated in that press conference, and it was like the Matthew Stafford we saw a couple of years ago. He's out to make a point. That bull rush, well, you throw it in there, that looks like that's going to be one for the rules committee next offseason. Looks like they are definitely looking to get that one out the door, as in the play is gone, because they tried to get it out the door this offseason, and it looks like, what the NFL is like. They gradually start the process. They put it in, people don't vote it in, and then Roger gets what he wants. By all accounts, he wants this gone come next season. So keep an eye on that one. For this game, the Eagles have been getting, I wouldn't say have been getting away, but that's unfair, because a measure of a great team is to win games when you're not playing well. They struggled last weekend, albeit putting up the points. Defensively, they struggled. I think the Rams have played well in SoFi, despite the constraints around home field advantage, and a lot of the crowd will be Eagles fans, similar to where it was with the 49ers came in. But they gave the 49ers an awful fright in that game. And I think to do the same here, but this time I think to get over the line, I'm going to go with the Rams to upset the odds and win this game. Some people might think this one is also one that could cause a bit of an upset in the store on Sunday, Colin, because the Chiefs have not been playing as well as we've seen in the past. They've started the season quite slowly, despite their 3-1 record. And I felt on Monday night, it was kind of similar to Josh Allen on Sunday night. The Sunday night performance by Patrick Mahomes was very Josh Allen in the first game, throwing it up there, and they did everything to give the Jets an opportunity to win the game. They came out the right side of it in the end, and they go into Minnesota. The Vikings are coming off their first win of the season last weekend against the Panthers, so renewed energy within that organization that they can get back on track and back in the playoff hunt, whether it's a wild card or winning the NFC North. Do you see this game as one that could be a bit of a banana skin for the Chiefs? Remember this time last year they lost going into the Colts, and people were surprised with that. Would it be a shock if the Vikings were to find a way to get back to the form of last year and win this game?
It would be a surprise, but would it be a shock? No. And I think, because, right, we know who the Chiefs are, and because they always end up playing it would seem the AFC Championship game at home, we have massive expectations on them. And sometimes I think their fans have these, ridiculous expectations. They're going to go unbeaten. But we know that the Chiefs deliberately look to peak later in the season. I mean, it's always the way that Andy Reid kind of goes about his business, certainly since Patrick Mahomes came in there. And so I wouldn't be overly concerned with the way the Chiefs have started, because they do this. They try things in the first couple of weeks. They're a lot looser. And remember, their defense is ridiculously young. They have the youngest average starters in the league, so that takes time. I think are the Vikings capable of beating the Chiefs? Absolutely, right? Because the Vikings can score points. We have seen that in the past, but they have, I suppose, in Brian Flores, a coordinator who likes to send pressure. Sometimes that can work, but generally Patrick Mahomes is pretty good at diagnosing it. The Chiefs, I saw a stat saying they have the most drops in the league currently. They have 13. I do think it might be interesting to see if they might look to bring somebody in before the trade deadline. But with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, I just feel that they go in, they start as favorites, and as a Broncos fan, would I like to see the Vikings win? Yes. I just don't think they will. I think ultimately they'll come up a little short.
Right, I'm going for 2 in a row on the shot count. I'm going to go with the Vikings, because the Vikings do things in the league that makes no sense to the Vikings fans, to any NFL fan, and that is they lose games against teams that they should be beating, and then sometimes they navigate victories against teams that you should never expect them to beat. And right now the Chiefs, yeah, you're right, Colin, they will come again. They'll peak towards the end of the season. We'll be sitting here in January cold, but they'll be potentially going to the AFC Championship game and hosting it in Arrowhead. The reality is they're not playing well right now. The week before it was against the Bears, so we'll take that one out. The other games, the Jags victory on the road, they struggled. They only put 13 points against the Lions at home. Just couldn't get it going. And I just haven't been impressed with them. And the Vikings need this one. The Vikings can somehow pull this off. They're really, for me, then they'd be really back in the mix. And at some stage, Kirk Cousins has to stop giving the ball away. I think he has the most counts in terms of now, because Jimmy Garoppolo was out last weekend. In terms of turnovers, he's got the highest count in the league. That has to change. He needs to be more sensible and keep hold of the ball. So I'll go with the Vikings. I think it'll be a high-scoring game. I think the Vikings come out the right side of it, cause the shock. And we shouldn't be surprised, I don't think, because this is the nature of Vikings. All Vikings fans will tell us that is the case. And this brings us to the next one. And Colin, it's your Broncos at home hosting the Jets. And Jets fans are a bit kind of re-energized after the performance last weekend. They feel like they let one slip, which is great in a way to say that they let a game slip that they could have had. There's some kind of precarious decisions by referees, and they're a bit enamored by that and annoyed on Monday morning. But they're also very relieved to see their quarterback put in a performance last Sunday night. And if it wasn't for maybe that muffed fumble on the snap, they may have won that game. Do you see a scenario where Russell Wilson and the guys will struggle against this Jets defense, who can put it up to any team on their day? Or do you think coming back home after having the 2 losses earlier in the season, but navigating the comeback in Chicago last weekend, will have taken a little bit of pressure off Sean Payton, and they did put up some numbers offensively. Can they keep it going this week and beat this Jets team?
I think they can. I mean, again, before the season started, this was kind of a mouth-watering fixture, especially with Sean Payton's comments. But it's really been dulled because both teams, especially for the Jets, obviously losing Aaron Rodgers, but neither team have been particularly good. Yeah, the Jets put it up to the Chiefs, and lots of people will point to refereeing decisions and various other things, but ultimately they couldn't get it done. I I think there is enormous pressure on Sean Payton around this one because he made the comments that he did. I mean, and he said what fans were thinking about how bad a job Hackett had done, but that got everybody's back up. But he's got to go and do it. The Jets have got Zach Wilson there. Like, if the Jets win this, what's Sean Payton's excuse going to be? And Bill Parcells is supposed to be his mentor. Bill Parcells' big thing was accountability, no excuses, be prepared, change the culture, etc., etc. I think the Broncos have the offensive weapons to do it. I think the issues this season have not been Russell Wilson, right? I think Russell Wilson's been fine. He's been good in certain games, but it's the defense that is the real issue. I don't think the Jets are good enough to take advantage of that. Other teams will, but I don't think the Jets are. And despite how bad the Broncos are defensively, they go to 2-3.
I agree with you. I think Broncos win this game. Like, Zach Wilson had a really strong game a couple of years ago in his opening season against the Titans, caused a big shock when it looked like their season was spiraling. He had a really strong performance last year in winning game, and obviously he had a strong performance last weekend. But that's where we're at. We've seen one swallow and all that. The inconsistencies are there. Can he put two? Can he piece two strong performances together back to back weeks? I don't believe he can, and unless we see it. How can you? You can't trust it. We've seen enough now coverage that we just can't trust the guy. I think the Broncos defense makes it very tough for him on Sunday, and they get into it. They find ways to pick him off again because his interception count, maybe with the exception of last weekend, has been quite poor. And I think the Broncos need this one. I think they get back to 2-3, and in a division outside of maybe the Chiefs in the long run is there for a team to push on. And for all the flaws they've had over the course of the past 2 weeks, maybe giving up those 70 points is the best thing that happened and making that strong comeback last weekend. I'll go Broncos to win this game on Sunday evening. So it brings us to Sunday Night Football, and arguably the best game of the weekend. I looked at the fixtures and I said, the Bills game in London is the best one, but this really is the best one. Sunday Night Football, Cowboys, having come off last weekend's win at home to the Patriots, a really dominant performance defensively, go on the road against arguably the best team in the NFC right now, and that is the 49ers, who are 4-0. Another game in Santa Clara. Reminds you the games in the 90s with Aikman and Young, and we had the playoff game the past 2 years, and the 49ers seem to be coming out the right side of these victories. Is the trend going to continue on Sunday? Do you see the 49ers moving to 5-0?
I do. I'll be honest. And Fred mightn't thank me for that one. But ultimately, I think Mike McCarthy is an issue at the highest level. Look, if the Cowboys were to win this, would it be a shock? No, because these are two high-powered teams. But to lose Diggs, it's against an offense like the 49ers, it's a real issue. And before we, I was talking to JP Costa, one of the things we were talking about was the way in which the 49ers and the Dolphins kind of approach is similar in some ways, right? But so they both use a lot of motion. They try to get guys going. But ultimately for the Dolphins, that they're looking to do is to hit a player in stride so that he's gone, right? With the 49ers, they're essentially getting it into a guy's hands where he's 5 or 10 yards down the field, and then he's breaking tackles because that's how they're built. And it's fascinating kind of to see these two guys, Shanahan and Mike McDaniel, who are obviously thinking similar ways, but have different personnel and ultimately different philosophies. But right now, the 49ers are the best team in football. They are, the the issue for them is around staying healthy. But Christian McCaffrey, I believe, right now is the MVP in the league. He is the absolute difference maker. He makes everything work for them. And I saw Jerry Rice getting a little bit chippy about the fact, that McCaffrey is breaking some of his records and saying, well, if he got the ball 20 times, I think he has a point. I still remember what Jerry Rice did to the Broncos in the Super Bowl with only 7 touches, three touchdowns, 140 yards. My God, if he touched the ball 20 times, I don't even want to imagine what that could have been. But McCaffrey is magic, and they've got Debo, and they just get at you every which way. Brock Purdy has been very impressive thus far. Defense has been really good. This will be a tight game. The Cowboys, they enjoy the bright lights. The issue with the Cowboys is always those smaller games, and when they get to the playoffs. But I think the 49ers will come through this.
The Thursday night game a couple of weeks ago in which the Giants played against the 49ers, in fairness to the Giants defensively, for a period of time, they got in Brock Purdy's face and put him off. And there was a number of throws that could have led to interception. A better team with a better defense would have taken advantage of that situation that night. And just think about what Micah Parsons and that front seven can do if they're on their game on Sunday night. Because Brock Purdy, for all the impressive performance we've seen, we've yet to see him be really under duress. Like, we probably would have saw that in that championship game if it wasn't for the injury. But you're right, it's very difficult to go against them. You've got McCaffrey there. You got 4 touchdowns last weekend. Debo, Brandon Ayuk had a great game last weekend coming off the shoulder injury. And Kittle really hasn't got going yet. What's annoying me slightly about the 49ers is you talk about chippiness. The players are coming out with comments. And they're coming out with comments about other teams and other players. The Giants have fallen into that over the course of the last few weeks between Daniel Jones. Then they got into some of the defensive stuff. And other teams and players, just focus on your own game. Focus on who you're playing. Don't be worrying about other teams. You can take care of them come the end of the season. They're only 4-0. They haven't won anything yet. So maybe they just need to take a step back. But look, you can't argue they're the most dominant team right now. I'm not sure they're the best team in the NFL. Like, I think right now I would put the Bills ahead of them because of the explosiveness of that offense. But in this particular game, I'll go 49. I think it might be a lot closer. I think the Cowboys will put up a real fight here. I think they'll give a very good count to themselves. But I think ultimately 49ers find a way to navigate victory on Sunday Night Football, moving to 5-0. Monday Night Football. It's Monday night. It is, yeah, Monday Night Football. This is a cracker, isn't it? This is the one we've been waiting for. This will certainly get you out of your bed at 1 o'clock in the morning on Monday night. It's the Packers going on the road into Vegas. And I know how much you love Vegas, Colin. I love Vegas. But in this game, what are we going to see from Vegas? Because we were talking about coaches under pressure, and we're talking about maybe Eberflus losing his job. Like you touched on it rightly so before last season and even this season. The Raiders had the money to spawn duties. They would have relieved their head coach of his duties by now. Where do you see this game going? Because, Devontae Adams will have a point to prove against his old team. I agree with you. They threw O'Connell under the bus, but what I would take away from all that is O'Connell is an impressive looking quarterback right now. If he plays on Sunday, can he cause a shock and beat this Packers team, who have been up and down, lost last weekend to the Lions, won the week before that? They're not a team that are feared, I would say. Can the Raiders cause a shock in this one?
Well, I think in terms of Vegas, I've got this headset on because it's like the helicopter ride over the Grand Canyon. I think we take very different approaches to time in Vegas. But if the head coach was a different head coach, the Raiders could. But they're lumbered with Josh McDaniels, and like, it was so idiotic to say what he said about Aidan O'Connell, who was, again, I'll point it out, young QB making his debut. And again, McDaniels lied at the podium, okay? He said, we went out of our way for the majority of his snaps. We had 2 guys on Khalil Mack. Do you know how many times they had 2 guys on Khalil Mack? 3 times out of 63 snaps that Khalil, right? Players pick up on that, and players will know you're lying. and players will suss you out, because if you're authentic and you're genuine, even if you're out of your depth, players will continue to play for you. But when you throw players under the bus, when you lie about players, when you pretend that it wasn't your game plan that led to it, that it was solely on the players, no, that doesn't work. Things are all wrong. You saw that video of Stephen O'Rourke, who arguing with Mark Davis about the sacking Josh McDaniels. He should be out in his ear. He should be the first coach sacked. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if Davante Adams ended up going elsewhere towards the trade deadline. I don't think things are right there. I don't think they will be right until they get rid of Josh McDaniels. I think one of the other interesting things around this year has been how angry coaches have gotten so quickly, right? Because you've had Brian Daboll throwing the tablet. You had Sean Payton getting very snippy very quickly. You had Brandon Staley, you had Matt LaFleur, and you had Josh McDaniels. So that I think is interesting. But Josh's seat of all the head coaches, and that includes Brandon Staley and Eberflus, Josh McDaniels' seat should be the hottest.
Is it Mourinho? Like when Mourinho wins, he takes all the credit, but when the team loses, he puts it back on the players. Is that the scenario that we're dealing with here? If they walk off that comeback victory last weekend, is he acclaiming himself as, look what I can do for this Raiders team, and then he throws a young quarterback on the bus? I didn't think he played that bad. I thought he played,
I thought he started out poorly, right? Because they got, again, the Chargers got enormous pressure on him, but I thought he stuck to it. It would have been so easy for him to drop his head. It would have been so easy to do that because things weren't going right. And he stuck in there and he gave him a chance. And ultimately it doesn't work out, but you can't pin it on a guy making his debut. I mean, again, this wasn't the number one overall pick. This wasn't Andrew Luck. This wasn't Peyton Manning. This wasn't some massive free agent acquisition who you were just bringing in. Like, this is a kid making his NFL debut, and this is what you're pinning him on. So it's Mourinho without the success. This would be like one of Mourinho's coaches. Like, Bill Belichick is the architect of it. Josh has had 2 bites of the head coach cherry, and he's been an unmitigated disaster in both instances.
It must be love. So is it love to win this game on Sunday night with on the other side of the fence with the Packers coming off that loss? Because the Packers, for me, have been exactly what we thought they'd. They would be a joy to watch at times. They would kind of surprise us by the nature of, and I always felt Jordan Love would be better than what we saw in the past. He's had that extra year and a couple of years to mature and get used to the fact that the situation he's going to take over. And right now, like last week, he was in a really difficult situation. The offensive line wasn't really bad in that Thursday night football game. He was sacked time and time again, and still kind of found his feet a little bit in the second half. Where do you see this one? Do you see the Packers, or do you think it's a Raiders victory Monday night?
No, I have the Packers winning this. I think the Raiders are all at sea. I really do. I think that the players, I just don't think they're going to play for him. I think it's going to get worse and worse, that situation there. I think for the Packers, you're right. They're kind of what we expect in that they're up and down. I think they've got an issue with their defensive coordinator. But yeah. I think Jordan Love he's been fine. The only thing I would say is I would imagine they are probably wishing that they had given themselves maybe another year of Jordan Love. And this might be where we see the franchise tag. But again, it's early, but he has been up and down. We need to see more from him. But the Packers they've got a head coach who is competent. Yeah, he's been snippy at times, but you've got a young, like Jordan Love is the most experienced guy there, right? They're so young. They will be up and down, but yeah, they're going to beat the Raiders.
Yeah, they've done a lot very quickly. They've got a lot of these young wide receivers. Reed had a big game last weekend. Again, players put it down the order in terms of when they came in. Yeah, I'm with you on this. I'm going to go Packers. I think the Packers close out week 5 with a victory on Monday Night Football. That brings us to the end of our week 5 preview. Obviously, we've got a couple of podcasts coming up in the course of the few days. DJ, got Costa coming up in terms of discussing the Jags. Nate Geary's coming on with you, Colin, discussing the Bills ahead of Sunday's game. 2 good podcasts to listen out for.
Yeah, and you had Phoebe on as well. Sure. We have podcasts that go out 7 days a week. So for anyone listening, definitely do check those out. We kind of cover a variety of topics. There's an instant reaction podcast that goes out on Sunday night. Shane Brennan has a podcast on Tuesdays. Obviously, then we have our live shows, but we always get guests on as well to talk about different topics. And if you do enjoy the podcast, please do rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen. Wherever it makes a real difference, it helps other people to find us, or just tell a friend. There's lots of people out there who are into the NFL in Ireland but are unaware of the Irish NFL show, and you can make a real difference if you were to let people know about us.
Yeah, sounds great. Really appreciate it of people who will do that for the show. Okay, that's it for now. Looking forward to Sunday in Tottenham, Colin, and we'll chat on Tuesday when we get back into what happens this weekend.
Okie doke, we'll leave it there. So.